Our story begins in a completely normal high school where the principal is a sea creature who dresses like Peter Griffin, the homeroom teacher is a literal T-Rex, and every single student is a wild animal, except for Jin, a dumb ugly human ape who, despite hating all animals, this absolute RIZZ demon will obviously find himself with way more Pokemon waifus than he can handle, as these animal girls turn his life upside down. But all this begins on Jin's first day at the zoo they call a school, which immediately starts off on the wrong foot as Jin realizes that the only food served at the cafeteria is bugs, grass, and raw meat. And when he orders raw meat and asks the gorilla lunch lady to cook it for him, she rightfully thinks Jin is an idiot. And to make matters worse, Jin accidentally sits down at the same table as Ranka, a tiny wolf girl with a single-digit IQ, who immediately believes that Jin is trying to steal her food like some wild animal. So, not wanting any trouble, Jin just decides to give her his thick, juicy meat instead, which instantly calms the dumb chihuahua down. Grateful for his generosity, Ranka climbs onto the table and announces that Jin has been given permission to join her pack, which he immediately refuses while trying his best to ignore her, fearing that Ranka may lower his brain cells just by being near him. Suddenly, however, Hitomi, the only other human in school, asks to sit next to Jin, which he of course immediately agrees to, as he begins fantasizing about every animal disappearing from the school, so he can live a peaceful high school life with just him and his beloved Hitomi. But this dream is quickly crushed when Ranka begins shouting at Hitomi to stay away from her new pack member, which causes Hitomi to flee in terror. Frustrated by this, Jin calls Ranka a complete idiot, as he once again refuses to join her pack, while pointing out that all the other students are forming packs with their own kind, and that a wolf pack with a human is completely unnatural and stupid. Ranka tearfully denies this, however, as she recalls how a brave human child once saved her from a group of bears that were harassing her, which made her realize that other species were kind-hearted too, and she runs away crying. Later that night, however, Jin realizes that he was actually the one who saved Ranka back then, but unlike how she remembers it, in reality the bears just beat him up mercilessly, which started his long-lasting hatred of animals. The next day at school, Jin sees how Ranka is so desperate to be a part of a pack that she put on a fake horse head and willingly became the servant of Kuro, a zebra girl who leads the proud and noble horse pack. Annoyed by Kuro's high and mighty behavior and the disrespectful way she treats her underlings, Jin decides to intervene on Ranka's behalf and points out how zebras are in fact donkeys, and not proud majestic horses as Kuro claims. This fact completely shocks Kuro, who refuses to be compared to a bunch of ugly donkeys casually playing Magic the Gathering. So Jin decides to prove it in a true Chad way by grabbing Kuro and exposing her butt-unca donkey tail to everyone, which looks nothing like a horse's tail. Completely embarrassed by her true donkey nature being exposed, Kuro immediately runs away. And seeing how Ranka is left with no pack once again, Hitomi finds her later that day and graciously decides to invite her to join the cooking club she started with Jin. But as they talk, the two are attacked by 3 bears who plan to eat Hitomi, because apparently that's just something you can do at this school, I guess. Surprisingly, however, Ranka fearlessly leaps in to defend Hitomi, granting her new friend an opportunity to escape. Meanwhile, Jin arrives moments after Ranka was easily subdued, and just hits the bears with bear spray that he pulled seemingly out of nowhere, neutralizing them instantly, but accidentally hitting the dumb chihuahua in the process too. The bears immediately wash off the spray though, and spring right back into action by nearly killing Jin. This infuriates Ranka, whose wrath channels a golden aura around her, and she slowly goes Super Saiyan, reaching heights of inhuman strength never before seen by mere mortals. And then she's slapped away effortlessly.
Huh?
Thankfully, Hitomi returns with their perfectly normal T-Rex teacher, who literally just bites one of the student bears because apparently that's just something you can do at this school. Afterwards, Jin thanks Ranka for trying to save him and Hitomi even though she failed completely, and ultimately agrees to join her pack as a show of gratitude, which makes Ranka so happy that she leaps onto him and begins licking his face like a happy puppy, while Hitomi is too flustered to look. The next day after school, Jin informs Ranka that she'll need to pass a cooking test in order to join the cooking club, when Yukari, a koala girl, appears out of nowhere and immediately agrees to take the test too, even though no one has any idea who this weirdo is. And when they ask her why she wants to join, Yukari reveals that as a koala, she's only ever eaten eucalyptus leaves her entire life, but she vaguely remembers once eating something else that was incredibly delicious, and she's now on a mission to uncover this mysterious flavor from her past. Jin, however, who barely even tolerates Ranka, doesn't want more people joining the cooking club, as his real goal is to be alone with his beloved Hitomi. So he schemes to make Yukari give up on the club by challenging her to cook an impossibly mouth-watering dish that would impress even the anime gods. But Yukari surprisingly takes him up on the challenge without much pushback, and quickly whips up a pasta dish garnished with eucalyptus leaves, which the girls absolutely adore, much to Jin's annoyance. But when it's then Ranka's turn to pass the test, Jin has to watch over her to make sure she doesn't burn the whole school down, since she has the cooking skills of a cardboard box, carries meat with her mouth, and even washes ingredients with soap. Meanwhile, Yukari watches Jin and Ranka cook together and wonders why Hitomi isn't upset that Ranka is trying to steal her man. In response, however, Hitomi calmly replies that Jin and her are just friends.
Emotional damage.
Crushed by being friend-zoned, Jin begins to cry, but immediately blames this on the fact that he's cutting onions. But now Jin hates Yukari even more than before and comes up with a devilish plan to make sure she never joins the club. He grabs Ranka by the shoulders and convinces her that all she needs to cook a delicious meal is to pour all of her love into it, which immediately motivates her to try her best, but the end result is a disgusting vile dish that she thoughtfully named Ranka's love. That's when Jin reveals that Yukari must now pass the second challenge, which is to eat Ranka's abomination of a dish. Unfortunately, however, Jin is hit with the reverse Uno card when Ranka begs him to taste her love too, as she believes that she's Gordon Ramsay, even though she's closer to being an idiot sandwich. But while Jin fights off Ranka, Yukari decides to dive right in and takes a bite out of Ranka's dish. And to everyone's surprise, Yukari recognizes this dish as the mysterious flavor she's always been searching for, that she now remembers was actually koala droppings all along, which baby koalas must eat to develop a resistance to the toxins in eucalyptus leaves. This realization petrifies Yukari, but she still can't stop herself from eating Ranka's love. Meanwhile, Kurumi, a cat girl, secretly watches all of this horrible nastiness unfold. The next day, Kurumi sneaks her way into the cooking club and uses her cute hypnotic purring to manipulate the gang into letting her join. But even though Jin is unaffected by this due to his hatred of his hatred of animals, the girls still quickly grow fond of Kurumi and allow her to join. And as they cook together, Yukari and Hitomi are completely enthralled by Kurumi, while Ranka fears that she's losing her place in the club. When Kurumi then believes that she's won most of the club over, she then uses her cute hypnotic purring to manipulate the girls into quitting the cooking club and starting a napping club instead. But they surprisingly overpower the hypnotism and refuse, as the girls are serious about their culinary ambitions. Seeing her plan unravel, Kurumi claims that she's now bored of them and leaves the club. The next day at school, Ranka excitedly leaps into Jin's face as she reveals that she's found a new member for the club. But this new member is actually Miyubi, a lazy sloth that can barely muster up the energy to lift her head off her desk. And when she finally gets up, she immediately collapses after walking just a few steps. With no other choice, Jin carries Miyubi back to her room, which is surprisingly full of sports equipment. Ranka then tries to help Miyubi take a bath, while Jin awkwardly tries not to look at her plot. But he kinda doesn't have a choice when Miyubi overheats and nearly drowns after Ranka ran off to get soap. And after uncomfortably having to bathe and clean Miyubi, she thanks Jin for letting her join the club, which Jin immediately denies. But when Miyubi then reveals that she always felt lonely before meeting Ranka, Jin feels guilty and decides to let her join after all, which makes Miyubi incredibly happy, but she immediately collapses after talking too much. Jin also decides to let Kurumi join the club, as he knows that she's been secretly following them all day. In response, Kurumi surprisingly admits that she actually just wants to be friends with everyone. But saying this out loud flusters her immensely, so she instead claims that she hates everyone and immediately runs away. And with this, the cooking club now has 2 new members. The gang then decides to celebrate this accomplishment by cooking and eating delicious curry together, but Miyubi collapses again from the energy required to chew. The next day at school, Mickey, the student council president, addresses the entire school and warns everyone to avoid interspecies friendships, since it's dangerous and unnatural for animals to socialize with other species. Once she returns to her office, however, she immediately sheds her clothes, as she reveals that she's actually a naked mole rat, who see clothing as unnatural and humiliating. Meanwhile, the leader of her mole rat army informs Mickey that they've been documenting the activities of the cooking club by showing her a comprehensive video describing each member of the club. And with this evidence, Mickey concludes that Jin is obviously trying to set up a multi-species harem, and sends her army to discreetly gather evidence against him. Meanwhile, at the cooking club, Jin and Ranka are spontaneously kidnapped by a harem of lion girls and taken to King, the most powerful lion in the school, who mistakenly believes that Jin is an expert RIZZ lord who can teach him the secrets to interspecies dating. because as it turns out, King is actually in love with Shiho, an Impala girl, who doesn't even know that King exists because he's too shy to speak to her and always just has his harem do everything for him. But with Jin's advice, King finally gains the confidence to try and talk to Shiho, so he has his harem lift him up and carry him out of the room. But they accidentally knock his fat head against the doorframe instead. And throughout the rest of the day, King tries to approach Shiho several times, but just ends up scaring her off at every opportunity due to his incredibly intimidating demeanor. He even tries hiding in the bushes for her like a true gentleman, but somehow that doesn't work either. And at the end of the day, even the mole rats, who have been recording every moment of King's embarrassment throughout the day, tear up at watching King fail over and over again. But things quickly get crazy the next day at school, when a group of male lions suddenly challenge King for ownership of his harem, while holding Shiho hostage, as they've noticed that King has a weird obsession with her, but surely there's nothing weird about stalking your crush from the bushes. But when one of the lions threatens to devour his beloved Shiho, King immediately goes Super Saiyan with his hair spiking up, and effortlessly claps all of their faces in a matter of seconds. But just as King's about to finish off the last lion, he surprises everyone by instead cutting off his impressive black mane, which was unfortunately the only reason his harem loved him in the first place, causing them to leave him. But with this brazen act, King manages to finally get through to Shiho as he confesses his feelings to her. However, Shiho replies that she's not yet ready for a relationship as she's not in heat, and the two agree to just be friends for now as they walk off hand in hand, while the mole rats continue to record everything like a bunch of creeps. But after watching the video of this whole situation, Mickey is even more convinced than ever that Jin is not only trying to create a multi-species harem for himself, but he's also trying to get other males to do the same. So she decides to finally confront him once and for all, even though this means having to put clothes on, which is tremendously embarrassing to her. And she can't understand how the other students are able to just walk around with clothes on like a bunch of shameless weirdos. On the way to the cooking club, however, Mickey and her mole rats bump into Kurumi, who as a cat is eager to toy with her new rodent friends. But in order to protect their queen, the mole rats bravely sacrifice themselves to be Kurumi's playthings, while Mickey goes on ahead to confront Jin. Once she arrives at the clubroom, Mickey immediately accuses Jin of being a perv while simultaneously shedding her clothes again, and orders Jin to immediately disband the cooking club, which she says is just a guise for him to create his harem. But just as Jin denies this claim, King casually waltzes in with impeccable timing and offers Jin some advice on managing a harem. However, when Ranka saves the mole rats from being eaten by Kurumi, the mole rats convince Mickey that there's nothing unnatural nor wrong about being friends with another species after all, and Mickey decides to leave the cooking club alone for now, but promises to continue keeping a close eye on Jin. Sometime later, it's revealed that after King cut off his hair, his throne became available, and the males of the school have started to fight amongst themselves to see who can be the school's next top dog, or top lion or whatever, and rumor has it that an unknown person has been single-handedly defeating every other contender for King's throne. Meanwhile, Feral, Ranka's giant older sister, arrives at Ranka's school, but nervously hides while spying on her little sister. But when she overhears Jin call Ranka a dumb dog, she furiously bursts into the cooking club and threatens to rip his head off. But her anger is quickly subsided when she's reminded of how cute Ranka is, which is weird because loving your sister is usually reserved for harem protagonists. Feral then asks Ranka to come back to her pack, but Ranka refuses, claiming that Jin and her are basically husband and wife now, which Jin of course immediately denies. But because of this, Feral becomes convinced that the only way to get Ranka back is to make Jin a pack member too. But when Ranka says that this would only make her hate her, Feral is completely crushed and defeated by these words, and has to be carried out by her pack members. The next day, several lion boys mistakenly believe that Jin is actually powerful enough to have defeated Feral, and decide that they now need to defeat him in order to win King's throne. However, Yena, a hyena, appears out of nowhere and instantly defeats the lions in just a few seconds, while a gaggle of Yena's fangirls watch awestruck. Yena then challenges Jin to a fight to prove himself stronger than Feral, but Jin immediately refuses to fight a girl, which completely catches Yena off guard. Yena insists that he's a boy, but is left completely speechless when Jin just points out that only female animals look half human, while the males don't. This causes Yena to barge into the cooking club later that day, determined to prove to Jin that he is indeed a male, and refuses to leave until Jin admits it. So Jin just agrees without hesitation that Yena's a male and shoos him off, but Yena knows this isn't sincere and decides to definitely prove once and for all that he is a male. Meanwhile, the mole rats tell Mickey that Yena is causing trouble in the cooking club, and show her a video of Jin pulling down Yena's trousers, which makes Mickey faint from shock. In reality, however, Yena is trying to prove that he's a male while Jin is desperately fighting to keep Yena's pants on. But when Jin then reveals that female hyenas also have a baguette between their legs, Yena is completely shocked to learn this, and realizes that he actually was a female this entire time. Later that night, Yena announces to her family that she has accepted being a female, and her family is happy that she's finally realized it. So they give her a female uniform they had been saving for this exact occasion, and her brother even gives her a new haircut. But this just completely overwhelms Yena, and he goes back to calling himself male after all. Sometime later, as the school's sports festival draws near, Ranka is overly excited to have the cooking club participate, but is absolutely crushed when everyone else refuses to, except for Miyubi, who surprisingly also wants to compete despite being so frail. So throughout the rest of the day, Ranka and Miyubi begin training for the competition, even though the slightest bit of walking causes Miyubi to collapse. And things only worsen from there as the girls decide to help the mole rats build the sports field for the festival, and Miyubi continues to collapse all throughout the day and even accidentally crushes one of the mole rats with her bakery. But Miyubi's willingness to help despite how frail she is unexpectedly inspires the mole rats to work even harder, and her unwavering determination even reaches Hitomi and Jin, who are inspired to participate in the competition after all. At that same time, Miyubi suddenly gains the ability to move at normal speeds, which to her basically feels like she's Sonic. But while Ranka praises this newfound energy as a result of their rigorous training, Miyubi immediately collapses, which to be fair is basically exactly what her training consisted of. Miyubi is then taken to the infirmary, where it soon becomes clear that she actually has a cold, which had temporarily increased her heart rate and given her the zoomies. However, with Miyubi now unable to participate in the sports festival, the rest of the team decides to try their best and win in her honor. But reality soon slaps them like my mother with a slipper when the club loses every single competition despite their best efforts, as they're simply unable to match the various natural abilities of the other animals, and the cooking club ends the morning competitions with 0 points. But for the afternoon competitions, Jin reassures Ranka that they can still win the sports festival, as the upcoming challenges are well suited for their natural abilities. And this is quickly proven true when Yukari effortlessly wins the arm wrestling competition against the gorillas, thanks to a koala's unexpectedly powerful grip strength. And Jin also secures a win in the endurance race under the scorching hot sun, as humans have the most endurance out of all mammals, but he barely makes it out alive. However, the chimp team resorts to foul play by poisoning Hitomi before the swimming competition, prompting Miyubi to brush off her cold and take Hitomi's place, since sloths apparently have excellent swimming skills, which Miyubi uses to great effect to quickly take the lead in the race, until the chimp team cheats again by using a literal boat, causing Miyubi to nearly drown. But despite this, Feral, her goons, the mole rats, and the whole crowd begin cheering for Miyubi, giving her the strength and resilience to finish the race, before succumbing to exhaustion and collapsing as usual. And in a dramatic finale, Ranka dashes through a challenging jungle course, and uses her incredible wolf speed to catch up to the chimp team, and even threatens them never to mess with the cooking club again, before effortlessly winning the race. And with this final win, the cooking club secures the top position in the sports festival and emerge victorious. Several days later, a panda girl named Mei arrives at the school in a red limousine, surrounded by a crowd of adoring fans who absolutely love pandas. But due to her species being so rare, Mei is actually a spoiled brat who's used to being pampered and having her every whim catered to, usually by her red panda manager. While walking aimlessly around the school, Mei is drawn to the cooking club by an irresistible aroma, and in an audacious display of rudeness, she eats all the dumplings Jin had made. But just as Jin and Yukari are about to unleash some WWE justice upon her, Mei reveals that she's the new panda student, and the club members are all immediately amazed and awestruck to be in the presence of the new star of the school. Jin, however, is completely impervious to her allure, and is unimpressed with her status, and simply just grabs her and throws her out of the clubroom. Having never been treated like this before, Mei is completely embarrassed and confused. So the next day at school she tries to cozy up to Jin, and even offers him money in exchange for letting her join the cooking club, but he just immediately tells her to get lost, which once again has never happened to her before. Refusing to give up, however, Mei bribes the other club members with expensive gifts to let her join the club. But just as she thought her plan had worked, Jin continues to treat her like a spoiled brat, and insists that she adhere to the same standards as everyone else, including cooking and cleaning up after herself. And when Mei's manager tries to clean up after a mess she made, Jin once again adamantly stands by his principles and forces Mei to clean the mess herself, which greatly embarrasses her. But as she continues to be chastised by Jin, Mei Mei embarrassingly realizes that she's secretly enjoying Jin's stern treatment of her. The next day at school, Mei Mei returns to the cooking club, much to Jin's annoyance, who's now determined to find a way to permanently kick her out of the club. That's when Jin decides that in order for Mei Mei to join the club, she'll need unanimous approval from all club members, including Kurumi, who just like a typical cat, reacts negatively to strangers trying to encroach on her space. So to make Kurumi more comfortable with Mei Mei, the gang decides to lock Mei Mei in a cage, a situation which she also secretly enjoys. But despite this, Kurumi still refuses to give her approval, which leads a stubborn Mei Mei to vow that she'll stay in the cage until Kurumi finally accepts her, and she spends the whole night sleeping in the cooking club. The next morning, Mei Mei awakens to find herself in a blanket, which she believes was a gift from Kurumi, as everyone's favorite cat bolts into the clubroom and announces that she's decided to approve Mei Mei's admission to the club. But since Kurumi is a cat, she rapidly alternates between showing fondness for Mei Mei and then completely disregarding her the next moment. Ranka then explains to Mei Mei that in order to be officially accepted into the club, she must now lick the pack leader. But Mei Mei shockingly licks Jin instead, believing him to be the alpha male, and she becomes absolutely flustered when her error is then explained to her. Sometime later, Yena, after clapping a few cheeks again, feels uncertain about how to act like a woman, and decides to stalk and observe Hitomi to learn from her, as she regards her as the epitome of womanhood. Meanwhile, Teru, a tiny little honey badger girl, aspires to join Farrell's pack after witnessing how Farrell absolutely bodied the bullies at the school. But her hopes are dashed when she learns that the only other female member who would be accepted is Ranka. Teru misunderstands this, however, and sets her sights on proving her worth by challenging Ranka. But on her way to fight her, Teru is unexpectedly distracted by a bird, and begins chasing after it like an idiot. At that same time, Yena's Hitomification continues as she tries to imitate the way Hitomi eats, smiles, and talks, but somehow always ends up sounding far too manly and tough. So Hitomi decides to take her to the cooking club so Yena can learn from more girls, but she's instead met with a barrage of criticisms from Jin on her inability to imitate his beloved Hitomi. Yukari then suggests that Hitomi act like Yena instead. But acting and dressing like a rebel just embarrasses Hitomi, which somehow turns the whole situation into something with a bit too much plot for YouTube to handle. In the midst of this, Teru just casually barges into the clubroom and ecstatically challenges Ranka to mortal combat, but is just swiftly kicked out of the room by Yena instead. And as Teru gets back up and prepares to go back in, she's once again distracted by the same bird and chases after it like an idiot. Meanwhile, over time, Yena's Hitomification seems to work, as she begins talking in a higher pitch voice, begins acting cuter, and just becomes much more feminine overall, and the club celebrates her successful change. But as soon as she spits back out her undigested food, which is a natural part of how a hyena's stomach functions, the illusion of Yena's transformation is completely shattered, and she realizes that being a traditional girl is impossible for her. Teru then appears out of nowhere and once again tries to fight Ranka, but suddenly, a group of lion boys return to get their revenge on Yena for beating them up a couple episodes ago, and hold Teru as a hostage, without realizing that honey badgers don't give no. They begin punching Teru to wipe that stupid smirk off her face, but a honey badger's thick skin makes it nearly invulnerable, so Teru is completely unfazed while eating a whole buffet of knuckle sandwiches, and the lions tire themselves out by punching her in vain. Tired of concealing her true nature, Yena wholeheartedly embraces her masculine side again and defeats the lions in a manly display of strength. Meanwhile, Teru basically ignores everything that just happened to her and once again challenges Ranka to a duel. But when Ranka adamantly refuses to fight this bite-sized tank, Yena steps in and challenges Teru to a fight instead, which Teru agrees to so long as she can fight Ranka next. But when the fight begins, Teru uses her stink gas, which is naturally produced by a honey badger's body. But when the wind blows it away, the stink gas accidentally hits Ranka and knocks her out, which Teru celebrates as a victory. Seeing that her sister has been hurt, Farrell grabs Teru by the head and slams her into the ground, causing an explosion so powerful that it knocks everyone else away, while leaving behind a giant crater. However, Teru gets back up as usual, but is shocked that she's feeling pain for the first time in her life, which completely amazes her. Teru then immediately runs up to Ranka and thanks her for the duel, since it allowed her to join Farrell's pack. But Farrell just grabs Teru and twists her like a pretzel while denying her request to join her pack. However, when Farrell sees how happy it makes her little sister to allow another species into her pack, she immediately changes her mind and lets Teru join her, and the gang cheerfully celebrates while Jin still lays unconscious on the ground. Later that night, Yena returns home to tell her family that she's going back to being a male, which the two hyenas accept without hesitation, despite having just bought her a bunch of new dresses. But back at school, Yena's new closeness with Hitomi just makes Jin incredibly jealous, as they seem to share a unique bond now, which leads to Jin and Yena arguing and bickering over Hitomi's affection. Sometime later, Jin's class is sent on a field trip to their school's Sea Academy, but Jin is annoyed the entire way there by Ranka's usual hyperactive behavior. Once there, however, everyone is amazed by how different the Sea Academy is to their school, like how the students here wear swimsuits and classes are held underwater. But as usual, Jin is completely unimpressed by everything he sees, except for the somewhat romantic scenery, which he hopes will help him grow closer to his beloved Hitomi. Meanwhile, Kana, a beluga whale girl, tries to deliver a captivating welcome show for Jin and his classmates, but fails miserably by running out of breath and immediately flees. Seeing this as an opportunity to get rid of Ranka so he can finally spend some quality alone time with Hitomi, Jin convinces Ranka that it's her duty as a boss to go cheer Kana up, causing her and Mei to enthusiastically run off. Shortly after, the girls catch up to Kana and learn that she secretly aspires to become one of the school's idols, known as the Dolphin Girls. But Ruka, the leader of the dolphins, refuses to let Kana join their club, since beluga whales are too slow to keep up with dolphins. But when Jin arrives a few moments later, he tells Kana that she should just showcase her singing prowess instead of dancing, as beluga whales are excellent vocalists. Unfortunately, however, Kana turns out to be an absolutely terrible singer, so the gang is back to square one. Later that night, Jin is surprisingly approached by Ruka, who, due to the dolphin's unique sleeping patterns, alternates between two personalities. One of her personas tearfully implores Jin to make Kana quit trying to join their idol group, as a mixed species show would only lead to public humiliation for Kana. But Ruka's other persona suddenly asserts control and threatens Jin to stop Kana from participating, otherwise she'll make him regret it. Meanwhile, just like Ruka, Kana expresses her worries to Ranka that separate species can't swim together, but Ranka is confident that Jin's idea of singing will work, since she knows he's a reliable and smart guy. Jin accidentally overhears this and, feeling guilty, decides to help Kana out by pointing out that she's been trying to sing with her mouth, but beluga whales actually sing using a special cavity in their heads, which Ruka had no idea about. So the next day, Kana and the cooking club join forces to put on a show for the whole school. And to everyone's amazement, Kana delivers an absolutely breathtaking song using her special cavity, which resonates in the hearts of everyone in the audience, including Ruka, who is overwhelmed by the beauty of Kana's voice. This causes Ruka's two personalities to converge, as they both express a desire to support Kana and help her achieve her full potential. This newfound unity leads Ruka and the other dolphins to join in on the performance by dancing to Kana's beautiful singing voice, ultimately resulting in an awe-inspiring show that leaves the whole crowd overjoyed. And at the end of the day, Kana is finally invited to join the school idols. Meanwhile, Jin finally has some alone time on the beach with Hitomi and closes his eyes as he musters up the courage to confess his true feelings to her. But when he opens his eyes back up, he's shocked to find a random male giraffe sitting next to him, who replies that he loves him too, and Jin immediately runs away while the giraffe chases after him. Sometime later, Mei is jealous that Jin always carries Miyubi on his back, and demands that he spoil her the same way. So Mei leaps onto his back too, which causes Ranka to jump on as well, and an annoyed Jin just throws everyone off instantly. And things only get worse for Jin when a sudden typhoon floods the school's underground, forcing the species living beneath the school to share dorm rooms with those living on the surface, and Jin is forced to bunk with Mickey and her army of mole rats, who quickly take over his room by turning it into her student council office. But Jin is already living a pretty heavenly life, as his new roommate hates wearing clothes. Despite this, however, Jin forces her to get dressed, seemingly just to annoy her, as he knows that this embarrasses her tremendously. Throughout the rest of the week, all the students of the school come to Mickey whenever they have problems, and completely invade Jin's room, which you already know brings him to the brink of murder. But instead of that, Jin just points out to Mickey that she works with even more species than him, which means that she also forms interspecies friendships. Realizing that he's right, Mickey is filled with such joy that she takes off absolutely everything, just as the cooking club enters the room and look upon in confused horror, while the sneaky mole rats continue to record everything. The next day at school, a new transfer student named Anne witnesses Jin saving Ranka from a bunch of thirsty canines who have been turned into absolute simps by Ranka's seasonal pheromones. Because of this, Anne decides to visit the cooking club to meet Jin, but finds that the only people present are the girls and the donkeys, who are all surprised and thrilled to see another human join their school. Meanwhile, Jin is busy hiding Ranka in his room from the pack of horn dogs who have been chasing Ranka all around campus since morning. But since Ranka is in heat, this also makes her act like a simp, and she suddenly pounces onto Jin as she just can't control herself around such an absolute RIZZ demon. However, Jin rejects Ranka by claiming that he hates her, which causes her to cry uncontrollably. Later that day after school, Anne finally bumps into Jin and tells him that she's interested in him. But Jin interprets this as a confession of love and rejects her, which immediately infuriates her. A couple hours later, a depressed Ranka finishes her heat cycle and decides to roll around in Jin's scent before going out for a late night stroll. She surprisingly bumps into Anne, who's just cooking food outside in the middle of the night for some reason, and Ranka confides in her that she's having problems with her human boyfriend. In response, Anne tells Ranka that she needs to confront Jin head-on, which immediately convinces her to do so. But when Ranka leaves, Anne secretly hopes that this will break up the cooking club. However, when Ranka confronts Jin the next day about why he hates her, he admits that humans are cruel liars, implying that he lied when he said he hated her, which Ranka only understands after Hitomi painfully explains it to her. But with this, Ranka forgives Jin and the cooking club returns to their usual antics. Meanwhile, seeing Ranka and Jin reconcile angers Anne, who returns to her original school, the Darwin Academy, where she regroups with her team, the Alliance of Extinct Species, made up of several supposedly extinct species, who seek the complete destruction of the human race as they deem them nature's greatest threat. And when their leader asks if Anne has what it takes to see their mission through, she assures him that she will make humans go extinct. When the school festival begins a few days later, Anne returns to Jin's school and helps the cooking club serve food for everyone in their little cafe as part of the festival. Yena also helps out, but she and Anne instantly dislike each other as they both compete for Hitomi's affection. Meanwhile, Jin just fantasizes about how he'll be able to take Hitomi out on a date and show off his amazing carnival game skills. Afterwards, while on break, Anne senses that her team has arrived at the academy and, not wanting Hitomi to get hurt, knocks her out and attempts to whisk her away to safety. But Yena intervenes before she can do so, leading to a heated confrontation. At that same time, Jin walks around while absent-mindedly fantasizing about Anne and Hitomi fighting over him, and accidentally bumps into Barbary, who's from a species of lions that went extinct because of humans and a member of Anne's team, who immediately seizes Jin and nearly ends his life, but King arrives just in time to save him. In response, Barbary immediately goes Super Saiyan and lunges at the lion, before sending him flying with a swift punch. Seeing how weak King is for a lion, Barbary blames this on his attachment to Shiho and mocks his love for her. But when Shiho tries to stand up for King, Barbary merely slaps her across the face. And that's when Barbary knew he effed up, as King immediately turns Super Saiyan 2 and dashes towards Barbary. And although he tries his best to withstand King, Barbary is ultimately defeated with a powerful fist to the cranium. Afterwards, King and Jin interrogate Barbary on who he is and why he came to this school, and quickly learn that Hitomi is in danger because of Anne, so they head out to search for her. Meanwhile, as Anne is winning the fight, she tells Yena that she wants revenge on mankind for driving her species to extinction. But as she monologues, Yena finds an opening and destroys her spear with his powerful jaw. Suddenly, a woolly mammoth appears, who Anne immediately recognizes as the leader of the Alliance of Extinct Species. However, as this gigantic mammoth grows closer with imposing strides, it berates Anne for going soft on humans, and proclaims it'll exterminate the human race itself. When Jin and the others then arrive shortly after, Jin realizes that Anne is actually a Neanderthal and not a human, which is why she blames humans on the extinction of her species. Meanwhile, the colossal woolly mammoth is revealed to have just been an illusion, with the true mastermind behind all this being Korimoto, a tiny mammoth girl whose immense strength and overwhelmingly powerful aura causes her to appear much more massive. And despite her tiny stature, Korimoto effortlessly knocks out King and Yena in a matter of seconds. With some quick thinking, however, Jin manages to temporarily neutralize her by spilling a bag of marbles that I guess he just has at all times, which Korimoto struggles to walk through, as elephants naturally avoid stepping on small objects. And when Jin reveals that he has even more marbles for some reason that only anime can explain, Korimoto instead proposes to settle this whole affair with a boxing match against Ranka, the winner of which will get Hitomi, which once again, only anime can explain. And as the girls get ready to duel, Feral chastises Jin for allowing Ranka to do something so dangerous, but Ranka tells her big sister that she's determined to win, and demands that she believe in her too. Once the girls enter the ring, Kuro is revealed to be the referee since zebras have stripes, and as soon as the fight starts, Ranka confidently dashes around her opponent. But Kurimoto's immense strength shatters both the ring and Ranka's confidence. She continues to dodge every one of Korimoto's blows, as a single punch would absolutely destroy her, and Ranka narrowly survives the first round by being saved by the bell. Meanwhile, between rounds, Anne tries to convince Korimoto that humans are not as evil as they once thought, citing the pure Hitomi as proof of this, but Korimoto refuses to listen. When the next round starts, Korimoto taunts Ranka to let her guard down, and uses this opening to punch her straight into the stratosphere. Ranka is immediately knocked out, but somehow gets back up all beaten and bruised, before the count of 10. Jin then grabs Ranka, fills her with hopium by patting her head and praising her as a good girl, while also encouraging her to give it her all, and just like a normal dog, being praised fires her up. But despite this, when the final round begins, Ranka eats a devastating punch to the gut, followed by a life-ending uppercut that knocks her out of the ring, and this wholesome anime about an animal school suddenly looks more like a fight scene from Baki. But as Ranka lays unconscious on the ground, the whole school passionately cheers her on to get back up, including Jin, and she miraculously leaps right back into the ring, with newfound strength and determination to win this fight. Meanwhile, Anne continues to beg Korimoto to reconsider her feelings about humans, but when she refuses, Anne has no choice but to end her friendship with her, which crushes Korimoto as she remembers how the two first met and bonded over their shared hatred of humans. Ranka then dashes forward and hits Korimoto with the weakest punch imaginable, but a heartbroken Korimoto simply falls over as she doesn't have the strength nor will to get back up. And with this, Ranka wins the fight against all odds, to the admiration of the whole crowd and all her friends. Following the intense fight, Anne, Korimoto, and the rest of their team reconcile with everyone else, and have a wholesome time cooking meals with the cooking club, and then the kitchen explodes.